All right, let's jump into this deep dive, and we're going to be looking at Leave Only a Trace by this Houston artist, Bob Camblin. And we've got a really interesting mix of sources here, descriptions, interpretations. We've even got video analyses all to kind of really unpack all the layers of meaning in this piece.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting about it is we're not just looking at the painting itself, we're also considering how it kind of relates to these ideas like Zen philosophy and impermanence, all those themes of change and these fleeting moments that are just so central to the whole human experience, really.
Right, so let's actually just jump into the painting itself here. The sources describe this really kind of serene beach scene, a sky that's just full of soft light and movement, and the ocean transitioning from these like beautiful pale turquoise colors near the shore to these deeper blues as it stretches towards the horizon.
Yeah, and the beach itself isn't just this flat expanse of sand either. It's described as this really textured mix of tans and greens and browns, almost like a tapestry that's been woven from sand and seaweed and like all those little bits and pieces that the tide leaves behind.
Yeah, it's making me want to reach out and touch the canvas, feel those textures. And speaking of textures, there's this recurring motif of driftwood kind of scattered across the beach. And not just random pieces, though. If you look closely, the letters L-O-A-T, they're subtly spelled out within the arrangement of the driftwood.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really makes this painting so captivating. It invites you to actually actively engage with it, to look kind of beyond the surface and to discover all these like hidden layers of meaning. But those letters, for example, they aren't immediately obvious. You really have to observe, spend some time with the artwork, to uncover them.
Yeah, it's like a visual treasure hunt.
Well,
And there are these other hidden elements, too, like these skeletal forms that are almost camouflaged within the scene. And even the artist's red roof studio is tucked away within the contours of the driftwood.
exactly. And these aren't just random details that are just thrown in for visual interest, right?
Yeah.
They're these symbols that have been carefully chosen to represent those central themes of impermanence and like the cyclical nature of life and death. The driftwood itself, worn smooth by like time and tide, it embodies this concept beautifully.
It reminds me of that Japanese aesthetic concept of wabi-sabi.
Yes, wabi-sabi is all about finding beauty in imperfection, in the impermanence of things. It's about appreciating, like, the cracks in a teacup, the way a flower wilts, the natural wear and tear that comes with age.
So the driftwood in Camblin's painting, it isn't just some random piece of wood on a beach. It's a visual representation of this idea that beauty can be found in the transient, the imperfect, the things that are constantly changing.
Precisely. And then you have the skeletal forms and the artist's studio that are kind of nestled within the driftwood, and they further reinforce this whole notion that nothing is ever truly lost, it's just transformed. It's this subtle but really powerful reminder that everything is in this constant state of flux, that life and death are just intertwined in this endless cycle.
Yeah, and it's all tied together by the painting's title, Leave Only a Trace. It's like Camblin is urging us to consider our own impact on the world, how we kind of navigate this dance of creation and decay.
Right, and that's where the connection to those Zen Buddhist principles becomes really apparent. Leaving only a trace can be seen as this metaphor for moving through life lightly, without clinging to all these material possessions or like fixed identities.
It's about accepting the impermanence of everything, letting go of attachment, and embracing the present moment. Like those Zen gardens, where the raked sand represents that constant ebb and flow of existence. But instead of just telling us about these concepts, Camblin's inviting us to experience them visually.
Exactly. Think about the concept of mu in Zen Buddhism. It represents emptiness, kind of like void. But it's not about nothingness, but rather the potential for everything to arise and then pass away. It's like that stillness of the raked sand in a Zen garden, just pregnant with possibility.
And just as the driftwood is kind of shaped by the forces of nature, our lives are constantly being sculpted by experiences and circumstances, right? We're not in control, not really. We're part of this larger flow, this constant cycle of creation and destruction.
And recognizing that, accepting that impermanence, can be so freeing. It allows us to kind of let go of this illusion of control, to appreciate the beauty of the present moment, and to approach life with, a sense of curiosity and wonder rather than like fear and attachment.
So the painting isn't just a depiction of a beach. It's this visual meditation on these really profound philosophical concepts, prompting us to consider our own relationship with time and change and, those traces that we leave behind. It's fascinating how Camblin has managed to weave all these ideas together in this way that's both beautiful and thought-provoking.
And We're just scratching the surface here. There are so many other layers to explore, other connections to kind of unpack. For example, the way Camblin kind of encourages an active and mindful way of looking at the artwork, it aligns with those Zen practices of meditation and contemplation.
Yeah, it's like he's challenging us to look beyond the surface, to slow down, to truly see what's in front of us. And by doing so, we might just discover something really profound about ourselves and our place in this ever-changing world.
Right, and we haven't even touched on how Leave Only a Trace kind of connects to other artistic movements like land art, which similarly uses natural materials to explore that whole relationship between humans and nature. It's going to be really fascinating to kind of delve into those connections in more detail.
Absolutely. So much to unpack. This is definitely a deep dive that'll stay with us long after we finish exploring it. But for now, let's take a moment to kind of absorb what we've discovered so far and get ready to dive even deeper in the next part of our exploration. So we've been talking about how Leave Only a Trace kind of embodies this idea of impermanence. But what's really striking me is how the painting itself, encourages this kind of active participation in that whole idea. You're not just passively observing a scene, are you?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost as if Bob Camblin is inviting us into a dialogue with the artwork. You know those hidden letters, oat, in the driftwood? The skeletal forms just blending into the landscape, the artist's studio tucked away. These aren't things that you just, glance at and then move on from. They really reward this slower, more mindful way of seeing.
So it's like he's saying, look closer, there's more here than meets the eye. Right. And that act of looking closer, of searching for these hidden meanings, that's very much in line with Zen practice, wouldn't you say?
Precisely. In Zen Buddhism, there's this huge emphasis on mindfulness, on direct experience. It's not about reading about, enlightenment in a book, but actually finding it through these everyday acts of awareness.
So by hiding those letters and those images, it's almost like Camblin is setting up this visual meditation for the viewer. We have to kind of engage with the piece on a deeper level, to be present with it, to fully appreciate its meaning.
Exactly. And that discovery, that aha moment when you finally spot that hidden studio or you decipher those letters, that's a reward in itself. It's like the painting's revealing itself to you, but layer by layer, but only if you're willing to put in the effort.
It reminds me of those optical illusions where you have to stare at an image for a while before the hidden figure kind of pops out, right? You have to shift your perspective, change how you're looking at it to actually see the full picture.
And that shift in perspective, that willingness to kind of see things in this new light, that's a really key element of what Camblin's doing here, I think. He's challenging our assumptions about art, about how we perceive the world, even about reality itself.
Speaking of challenging assumptions, this piece also seems to have this really strong connection to the land art movement. Remember how we were talking about artists like Andy Goldsworthy, who creates those temporary sculptures out in nature, just using these, materials found on site?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely a shared spirit there. Both Goldsworthy and Camblin are kind of working with this idea of impermanence, of using natural materials to create something beautiful that's ultimately surrendered to the forces of nature.
The difference being that Goldsworthy's sculptures exist physically in a landscape, while Camblin's beach is, captured on canvas.
Right. But both artists are exploring this interplay between humans and the natural world, that constant cycle of creation and decay. A Goldsworthy sculpture might be washed away by the tide or reclaimed by the forest. And while Camblin's painting, even though it's preserved on canvas, is still reminding us that nothing lasts forever.
Even the medium he's using, like watercolors, seems to speak to that sense of transience. Watercolors are so fluid, they blend and shift, almost like the tides themselves. It's like the very materials of the painting are echoing those themes it's exploring.
And while we're kind of drawing these connections, let's not forget the link to, artists like Salvador Dali, who used hidden imagery and optical illusions to really challenge our perceptions. Think about his melting clocks and the persistence of memory, right? It's like he's taking time, something we think of as this fixed and solid thing, and showing us its fluidity, its susceptibility to change.
It's almost as if Camblin is taking those threads of land art and surrealism and kind of weaving them together with this Zen Buddhist philosophy to create something entirely new. It's this fascinating blend of artistic movements and philosophical ideas all converging on this theme of impermanence.
And it's that theme, that underlying message about the fleeting nature of everything that really resonates with me. We live in a world that's constantly trying to deny impermanence. anti-aging creams, these indestructible gadgets, even the promise of eternal life.
Right, it's like we're constantly fighting against the natural order of things.
But leave only a trace, it kind of reminds us that change is the only constant. It's like that famous quote from Heraclitus, right? No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man.
Everything is in flux. Everything's transforming, even as we speak. But instead of fearing that change, what if we embraced it? What if we saw it as an opportunity for growth, for renewal, for letting go of the things that no longer serve us?
That's a really powerful question, and it's one that this painting and our whole deep dive into it is urging us to really consider. As we move into this final part of our exploration, let's keep that question in the forefront of our minds. How can we apply this understanding of impermanence to our own lives? How can we leave only a trace in a way that's both meaningful and authentic?
You know, we've explored Leave Only a Trace from so many angles now.
Yeah.
The visual details, the symbolism, Zen philosophy, even land art, and a little touch of surrealism. It's amazing how much depth there really is to uncover in what just seems at first glance like this simple beach scene.
It really is. It's a testament to Bob Camblin's skill as an artist, but also to the power of art itself, to hold these complex ideas and to kind of spark these conversations like we've been having. We started by talking about the painting's message of impermanence, and I'm kind of curious now to shift our focus a little bit inward.
Oh, you mean like how this idea of leaving only a trace applies to us personally?
Yeah, it's a question I've been kind of wrestling with this whole time throughout this entire deep dive. Knowing that everything's temporary, even like our own existence, it can be so liberating, but honestly a little daunting too.
Yeah, I think that tension that you're describing, that kind of push and pull between acceptance and maybe a little bit of resistance, that's right at the heart of this painting. On the one hand, recognizing that nothing lasts forever, it can free us from this illusion of control, from needing to cling so tightly to things that are constantly changing anyway.
Like trying to hold on to the sand as the tide comes in.
Yeah.
Right? It's just going to slip through your fingers. Maybe it's better to just appreciate how the water reshapes the beach, how it creates something new with each wave.
Exactly. It's about letting go of those attachments, embracing the present moment, and finding beauty in the natural flow of life. Just as the waves wash over the sand, erasing those footprints, rearranging the driftwood life is this continuous process of creation and dissolution. But then there's that other side of it too, right? Knowing that our time is limited, that we'll inevitably leave only a trace, it can feel like this call to action too. It makes you want to make the most of your time here, do something really meaningful, connect with others in a real way, to leave the world a little bit better than you found it.
I really love how you put that. It's not just about accepting impermanence passively, but also about recognizing that our actions still have consequences, that even small gestures can ripple outwards and create these really lasting changes. Think about those hidden letters in the driftwood, subtle, almost invisible at first, but once you see them, they change your whole understanding of the artwork.
It's like those, seemingly insignificant acts of kindness that we encounter, or those moments of genuine connection with another person. It might feel small at the time, but they have this power to brighten someone's day or shift their perspective, maybe even to inspire this whole chain reaction of positive energy.
And those ripples, those traces of our existence, they just continue to spread outward long after we're gone. Just as that artist's hidden studio in the painting suggests this legacy of creation, so too do our own creative endeavors, our relationships, the values that we embody. They all leave behind this mark that shapes the world around us.
It's a powerful reminder that even though we're these temporary beings, what we do, how we live, it matters. It has this lasting impact. It's up to each of us to decide what kind of trace we want to leave behind.
And I think that's such a beautiful and empowering message to take away from this whole deep dive. Leave only a trace isn't just about impermanence. It's this call to live consciously, to create with intention, and to really embrace the beauty of change, knowing that even in our absence, those traces will continue to shape the world.
So as we wrap up our exploration of this really incredible artwork, I'm left with this question. What kind of trace do you want to leave on the world? What will your legacy be? There's no single right answer, but it's definitely a question worth asking ourselves again and again, as we navigate this ever-changing journey of life.
And remember, even though our individual traces might kind of fade with time, the collective impact of our choices, our actions, our creative endeavors, it's all going to continue to shape the world for generations to come. So let's make those traces count. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep leaving your unique mark on the world.